doing good. So today we are going to start our new chapter, that is Entity Framework, and this is chapter number 5. But one more topic is left in the chapter number 4, that is model state. So first of all, I will discuss with you this model state property, and after completing it, I will move on to the next chapter, that is chapter 5, working with Entity Framework. In this chapter, we will discuss how we can connect up our applications with the database and how we can store the data in the database, how we can retrieve it. All these things we'll discuss today. So yesterday's session, we have discussed the concept of validations, how we can put the validations on our fields, and we have discussed many data annotations like required, string length, and compare, range, and so many others. I hope that you have understood all these data annotations and the concept that I have explained yesterday. If still you have any questions, any doubts, first of all, you can ask your queries, and then I'll move further. So any questions, any doubts if you have, you can ask your queries, please. If there are no questions and all the things are clear, you can click on to plus sign. Omani, you are asking that please revise HTML helpers. The HTML helper classes are available in the ASP.NET MVC, which you can use for creating your controls. We have also used this for creating the hyperlinks and for creating text box, radio button, or whatever kind of controls you want to create. You can use that HTML helper class. You can also use that HTML helper class for rendering your view. Okay, your partial view if you want to render. So at that time I have also used HTML.partial. Correct? So HTML helper classes you can use if you would like to create any controls on your page, such as there are many methods are available. Not for only creating a controls you can use. There are many other methods are also there. Just like we have HTML.partial that we have used for rendering a partial view. Okay. The same way we have some other methods also, just like HTML.actionLink. This ActionLink method you can use for creating a hyperlink. The same way you can write HTML.textbox. You can create a text box. HTML.radio button. So you can create a radio button. So it's very simple and easy to use. And these all methods we can use for creating a different set of controls in our HTML, in our ASP.NET MVC project. Okay. So today I'm going to show you the concept of model state. This is a very small concept. I'm just going to explain you on the slide that what do you mean by model state. As you can see right now on the slide, there are few things are written about the model state. While using a web application, when a user enters the data in the required format in the field of a web page, the data is bound to the corresponding property of the model class. Now this thing you already know, because this thing we have discussed in our previous session, that whenever we are going to use the properties, or suppose we are using the model, okay, based upon the model of your project, it will automatically create the fields. Okay, so let's say in your model you have ID, name, description, quantity, price. These all fields you are taking. So according to these fields, it will create the, according to these properties only, it will create the fields in your page. So if you have 4 or 5 fields in your model, then accordingly it will create 4 or 5 fields in your page. Which means that your fields are bound with the model properties. Okay. Now this process is referred to as model binding. Okay. So this particular process is known as model binding. That means we are binding our model with the fields, which fails if the user does not enter the data in required format. So last time we have discussed the validation also. But if suppose you are not adding a validation, but the data which you are entering, it is not in the required format. let's say the data type of the like quantity or the price is integer, but you are entering the string value, so definitely it can't accept that value because the type of the property is integer and you are entering a string value. So in that case, if model binding gets fail, okay, so to determine whether the model binding has failed or completed successfully, you can check the is valid property of model state. Okay, so the thing which I'm going to tell you here is only this one, is model property. Okay, this is model property we can use to check whether the binding of our properties is done successfully with the fields or not. Okay, or whatever data the user is entering in the fields, whether it is in the required format or not. So this we can check with the help of this is valid property. And how we can check this? You can see it on the slide itself. So if the model binding succeeds, the model state.isValid property returns true. So this is valid is a Boolean property. It will return true or false based upon the based upon the condition, like whether the model binding is done, model binding is completed or not. So if there is any error in the model state, the model state.isValid property returns false. So for example, the user is not entering a correct value. I am asking the integer value, but the user is entering string value. Then the model state is valid property will return false. And accordingly, you can do your operations or whatever task you want to complete, you can do it. So you can see we are writing one if condition over here. The same way we can also write if condition. So if model state dot is valid, then you can write the code to save the entered data and display an appropriate view. Otherwise, you can write the code to display the view with errors. Okay. So this thing we can do here, that if model state is valid, then you can render the view. You can just simply write return view and it will display the view. Otherwise, it should display the error. Okay, so this kind of a thing we can do over here. Correct? All right. So is valid property is available in the model state, which you can use for identifying whether the model is properly bound or not. Correct? So this particular thing we will use in our database connectivity also. Okay, so I was just giving you the brief idea about this model state property. So this is our model state property which we can use in our ASP.NET MVC application for determining whether my model is bound with my fields successfully or not. Okay. All right. Now the next topic which we are going to start today is a very important topic, and yesterday also I told you that this is one of the very important concept in ASP.NET MVC, which you must understand very clearly, because based upon that only you have to create your projects. Okay. However, all the topics are very important in ASP.NET MVC, but this is the topic which we are going to learn for understanding the database handling. Okay, because till now, whatever kind of applications we have created, we were storing our data temporarily in the collections or in the variables or something like that. But now I would like to store my data on a permanent basis. Correct? So how you can store your data on a permanent basis in your database, that we will discuss today. Okay. So in this session, you will learn to identify the fundamentals of entity framework and how we can work with entity framework, that we will discuss. Now, what is an entity framework? Entity framework is a data access technology. I don't know whether you have heard about this or not, but might be some of you might have heard about the ADO.NET. Okay. ADO.NET was the data access technology. It is still most of the developers are using. I can't say that it is totally obsolete. Many developers are using that ADO.NET. So ADO.NET is also a data access technology which we can use for connecting our application with a database in .NET. So you have one application, you have one database. How you can establish the connection between these two? You have to use one data access technology. And ADO.NET and Entity Framework are some of the data access technologies. Correct? So we are going to discuss that how we can use the data access technologies in our application and what do you mean by Entity Framework. Okay? Can you give me the pen drive, please, if you have? Okay, I will show you an animation also related to this Entity Framework. Okay, and I also will explain you that what do you mean by Entity Framework and how you can execute this. These all things we will discuss. Okay, but before I explain you anything about Entity Framework, I would like to show you. Just take this, Fazan. Okay, so we are not going to discuss ADO.NET because this particular technology we were using in our earlier days. Still, many developers are using this ADO.NET. I'm not saying that it is obsolete. Okay, but since we are using ASP.NET MVC, the best suitable data access technology is Entity Framework. Okay, and what is new in Entity Framework? Why we are not using ADO.NET? What are the limitations in ADO, and why we are using Entity Framework? That also I will tell you. Okay, so just hold on. This simulation is actually about Entity Framework only. Wait for a moment. Calling, and it will take a lot of time. Automatically it is doing that. Okay, so no problem, I can just show you this particular simulation here only. Okay, actually I was trying to upload it over there so that you can see it properly, but unfortunately I'm not able to transfer that. No problem, just show you here also. So I'm going to open this. And let me share my screen. I can increase the audio and I'm just disabling my video for a moment here so that you can see it in a full screen.
Most web applications often need to communicate with the database for storing and retrieving the data related to the application. An application stores the data in the form of classes and objects. However, a database stores the data in the form of tables and views. Therefore, the classes and objects need to be mapped with the database objects. For this, you need to write additional code. To overcome this problem, Entity Framework can be used. Entity Framework eliminates the need to write most of the data access code that usually needs to be written. It allows dealing with data as objects and properties. While working with Entity Framework, you can use the various approaches, namely, the database-first approach, the model-first approach, the code-first approach. If you already have the database, you can use the database-first approach. In this approach, Entity Framework uses the database and generates the model for you. If you don't have a database and you are at the initial stages of development, you can use the model-first approach. In the model-first approach, first you can create a model by using the Entity Framework Designer. Then Entity Framework uses this model to create the database. Another approach that you can use is the code-first approach. This approach can be used whether or not you have an existing database. If you don't have an existing database, you can create your own custom classes, and then the database can be created from them automatically. However, if you have an existing database, you can still define classes that map to the existing database. In addition, reverse engineering tools are available that allow you to generate the model classes from the existing database.
Okay, so in this particular animation, you have seen that we have different type of models over here, just like we have different approaches for working with Entity Framework. Now, why we are using Entity Framework over here? As you know that in your application, you are storing your data in the form of objects. We are creating the model, and then we are creating the object of the model, and then we are storing the data. So that means the data is getting stored in the form of objects. Whereas in my database, I can store the data in the form of tables. So Entity Framework will help you to bind your objects with database tables. If you want to do so generally without using the Entity Framework, you have to write a lot of complex code. But with the help of Entity Framework, you can do it very easily, in an easy way. Okay. So very easily you can do with the help of this Entity Framework. So today we will discuss like how you can use the entity framework data access technology in your application, how you can bind your application with the database, and how we can use different approaches available in the entity framework. There are three different approaches are available in the entity framework: database first approach, model first approach, and code first approach. These all approaches we will discuss in detail. Okay, so let's see. In a database, data is stored in the form of tables and views that we all know. Okay, because we already have a knowledge of SQL databases or any other databases. So we already know that in the database we store our data in the form of tables and views. However, in application, data is stored in objects which have a different structure than tables and views. Therefore, to retrieve the data stored in tables and views, the definition of classes and objects need to be mapped with that of the relational objects, means with your database tables. Correct? This requires you to write a very complex code. So on your slide you can see the same thing which I have just explained you. That in your database you have a data in the form of tables. Okay, tables or views. And in your application you have a data in the form of objects. Now in order to store this data in the tables and views, you have to map the definition of your objects with the database tables. And if you are doing so, this requires you to write a very complex code. To overcome this problem, .NET provides the object relational mapping called entity framework. Okay, it is also known as ORM, that is ORM framework means object relational mapping. Okay, so this is the thing. Student from Pune, Hadapsa, you are saying unable to hear, so can you please get in touch with your resident faculty? But if the student can't hear, then how he can get in touch? Okay, just a minute, I'm just enabling all the options. Student from Pune, Hadapsar, can you hear me? Okay. So there is a local issue, I think. So I hope that you all have understood that why we are using the entity framework over here. Is that clear to all of you? You must have a clear picture about the entity framework, what is the need, why we are using entity framework in our application. If it is clear, then I will go to the next part. Okay. Okay, so there are no questions on my screen now. That means all the things are clear. Fine. So entity framework uses different approaches. Here you can see. In entity framework, it uses different approaches to manage data related to an application. And these approaches are database first approach, model first approach, and code first approach. Okay. So these are all the approaches we have in the entity framework, which we generally use for creating our application. Correct. So we'll discuss all these approaches one by one, what is the benefit of which approach and how to use it. Using this, we can connect all kind of databases. Yes, we can connect all kind of databases. So the first approach available in the entity framework is database first approach. Database first approach is considered to be the best suited approach if you already have an existing database. Let's take a very simple example. You are working in a software development organization and your team leader has assigned one project to you. And now you are working on that project. At the initial stage of development, you have already created the database. That means you already have an existing database before you are going to create your project. Okay? So maybe that database has been provided to you in the already, okay, and you have been asked to use that particular database in your application. So which means that database is already available, and based upon that database we would like to create our models and we want to use that database in our application. Okay. Tamal, you are asking why the data stored in the form of tables and views in the database. Tamal, do you have a knowledge of database? Do you have a knowledge of database, SQL Server? Tamal from Southex, do you have a knowledge of database? No. So you should have a knowledge of a database, then only you can go to that particular topic. That SQL Server is the prerequisite in our PGP. So you can't say that you don't have a knowledge of a database. Okay. This is a prerequisite. Without having a knowledge of database, you will not be able to understand this concept. And I'm not going to tell you like what is SQL, what is table, what is view, and how we can write the SQL queries, how we can fetch the data, how the data is getting stored. These things I'm not going to tell you, because it's a very vast concept and it will take a lot of time. And this module the students has already completed in their prerequisite. And after completing a prerequisite only, they are pursuing for this PGP course. Okay, they are just like learning these all concepts like ASP.NET and all. Correct? So database knowledge is must for this particular topic. It's not in my schedule, so you please check with your center why that particular. It's not in your schedule means like it is not running parallelly, or nobody is teaching you here on the SLT. Okay. SQL Server was there in the prerequisite. Prerequisite means this particular topic you must complete on a ILT mode. Okay, means in your center, the center faculty will teach you the SQL Server and all these things, and then only you should go to that part. Okay. I hope that you are enrolled for the PGP course, Tamal. Are you enrolled for a PGP course? Yes. So if you are enrolled for PGP course, then how you have not completed your SQL Server? It was there in your course and you must complete it much before. So database first approach we can use if we already have an existing database at the initial stage of development, and it generates the model by using the database. So this means that suppose I have one database. In my database I have around 15-20 tables. In that tables the data is already there. Now based upon that tables I would like to generate the model. Okay, so that means model I don't have in my application. I would like to generate the model based upon the database structure. Then I can use database first approach. Okay. So database first approach create classes and properties corresponding to the existing database object in the model. Correct. In the database first approach, it automatically creates the classes and the properties corresponding to the existing database objects. Just like if suppose in your database you have some tables called customer, employee, product, orders. Okay, so based upon that, it will automatically create the model. Customer, product, employee, orders. Fine. And it generates database structure and model related information in an XML file with the .edmx extension. So meaning is that database first approach you can use when you have a database, when you already have a database at the initial stage of development. Okay. Whenever you are going to develop a project, you already have an existing database and you have been asked to use that database in that application. Then you can use database first approach. Okay. Just a minute, I'm just going to connect up with Kamal. He has some query.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Sir,
Yes, Kamal.
Yeah. Sir, it was not in my schedule, sir, the database or SQL server, because I have
No, not in
completed
the
the
schedule
HTML5
means
and
what? Like it was not in your course, you are saying?
yes, sir, it was not in my course, sir.
Who told you?
The books, sir, it was coming in all the schedules.
No, who told you that the SQL server is not there in your course?
Sir, because I have completed the C# and HTML5 and then I have joined for this ASP.NET
So dear, that's
class.
what I'm saying. C# and HTML you have studied on this SLT platform, na? Just like right now you're attending.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yeah.
did you studied any topic on ILT mode? That means not on SLT, normally in the classes.
No, sir.
No, so it was the
no
prerequisite.
Classes, sir, I haven't.
So can you please do one thing? Can you please ask your center GL that is there SQL server in your course or not?
Okay, sir.
Okay. You please just ask and let me know. Okay, and then you will get your answer.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay.
So just go and ask and then connect up with me again, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, fine. Can we put more information in the, what is this? I think this is not related to this particular session. Maybe I'm getting some from some another session. Sometimes it happens that we get some questions from some another session because of the duplicate unit ID in the system. Okay. So database first approach, I hope that you all have understood. Is that clear to all of you that what is database first approach? Simply you can understand that database first approach means we have a database and according to that database automatically it creates a model. Okay. So database first approach is considered to be the best suited approach if you already have an existing database at the initial stage of the development. So whenever you are going to make a project, if you already have a database with you, you can use database first approach. Correct? Now the next thing, the model first approach. Model first approach is used when the database is not available in the initial stage of development. So now it is opposite. Okay, so now here the case is opposite. Here we don't have database at the initial stage of development. We would like to generate the database automatically. So model first approach gives you the flexibility to delay the creation of a database. Let's assume one more example we can take. Suppose you are working in a software development organization and you have been asked to create a project, any kind of a project, and right now the structure of the database is not yet decided. Okay, but you have been asked that you have to still work on your project on some another modules. You can work on your coding, you can work on your application structure, you can work on your application architecture. These all things you can work on. Meanwhile, they will decide the database structure and then you can use it. Okay. So model first approach gives you the flexibility to delay the creation of a database, which means that at the initial stage of development, the structure of the database is not yet decided. We have decided that we will create it later. In the meantime, we will do some another things. Okay, we will create the models in our application and database will create later. So model first approach allows you to view the different possibilities of improving database structure. And it allows you to first create a model by using the entity framework designer. So here the case is opposite from database first approach. In the database first approach, what we were doing, it was generating the model automatically from it was generating a model automatically from the database. Okay, so that means the database is already there. It is generating a model. Here, model is there and it is generating a database. Okay, so it is opposite. We have a model and we are generating a database automatically. So if we want to use a model first approach, we have to use that entity framework designer, and there we need to create one .edmx file, and in that edmx file we can design our model by using a drag and drop feature. Okay, but actually in our curriculum we have to use the code first approach only. This model first approach and database first approach, I'm just giving you the overview and I'm just telling you about these approaches. Practically the approach that we have to use in our course, we will use the code first approach. Okay, so this is a model first approach, means it automatically creates a database according to the model classes. Okay, there is one question from Kolkata College Street. Will the database create automatically from model class? Yes, that's what I'm saying, that it will automatically create the database from your model. Okay, so suppose you have created your model and 4 models you have created: customer, product, orders, employee. These 4 models you have created. Based upon that model, in your database, automatically it will create the database and it will create 4 tables: customer, product, employee and orders. Okay, and whatever properties you have defined in your model, it will create the same column in your table. Okay, so this is model first approach. What does EDMX file use for? EDMX file we will use in the model first approach for designing a model, because here we are not going to create the model by writing the code, just like we were doing earlier. How we were creating a model? We were adding the class and then we were adding the properties, we were writing our custom classes, writing the code for creating the properties. So that we will not do in the model first approach. In the model first approach, we will use the .edmx file for designing a model. Okay, and for that we don't have to write any code. There are some drag and drop features and options are available which you can use for creating the model. Okay, in the .edmx file. Yes, I am explaining the code first approach. Just wait, Ishant, I have not yet explained the code first approach. I have only explained the model first and the database first approach. Okay. So model first approach allows you to view the different possibilities of improving database structure. And after understanding this model first approach, now we have code first approach. So code first approach allows you to start the development of your application by coding custom classes and properties. Now, model first approach and code first approach, it is almost same, but there is a difference also. What is the difference? In model first approach, as I told you, that you don't have to write any code for creating your models. You have to use one .edmx file and then you can drag and drop the properties and you can create your model. Fine? So that is model first. Now in code first, there is no EDMX file, there are no drag and drop options are available. You have to create your own classes, you have to write your own properties. Just like we were doing earlier. The same way we have to create a model. Adding a class, adding a properties, that is code first approach. Okay? Based upon your model classes, it will automatically generate the database and the tables. So let's say you have created 3 classes in your project: customer, employee, products. Okay, according to that, it will create 3 tables in your database: customer, employee, product. And whatever properties you have defined in your model, accordingly it will create the column in each table. Okay, so this is code first approach. It allows you to start the development of your application by coding custom classes and properties, allows you to build a database without using the Entity Framework Designer or EDMX file. That's what I told you just. And it allows you to first create your own custom classes, and then the database is created from them automatically. And it provides option to drop and recreate the database if you change the model class. So these are the benefits of code first approach. So in this course, we will use the code first approach only, how we can use the code first approach, and how we can map our objects with the database. Okay. So I have explained you all these three approaches. I hope that these all three approaches are clear to all of you. If you have any questions, any doubts, you can ask your queries, please. All three approaches I have explained to you: database first approach, model first approach, code first approach. I hope it is clear to all of you. If all the things are clear, you can click onto the plus sign. All three approaches, if it is clear. Please explain code first. So Pooja, as I said that in code first approach, what we are doing, we are going to create our own custom classes for creating a model. What is the difference between model first and code first? This is the only difference. In model first, we are not going to write the code for creating model. We are using .edmx file. And in code first approach, we are going to write the code. As the name suggests, code first. So we are writing a code for creating a model. And automatically it will create the database table based upon your model classes. Okay, so this is code first. Please explain EDMX file once. EDMX file, I told you now that it is there in your project. You can create a EDMX file in your project for creating the model. For that, you don't have to write the code. You will get some drag and drop options by using which you can create your model without writing the code. It is known as Entity Framework Designer tool. Okay. EDMX file code first, data first is there, but code first approach not there. What you are asking, I'm not getting you what you are trying to ask. EDMX file code first, data first is there, but code first approach not there. Sorry, I'm not getting your question, student from Malleswaram. Can you please write the question again properly? If the database approach means what we can do, what is the step? The steps I will tell you later. Now, I have not yet explained the steps, how you can use which approach. Okay, I'm just explaining you the concept. And I'm asking whether the concept is clear to you. I'm not saying that whether this is clear or not, that how you can implement. The implementation I have not yet explained. So I will explain you how you can do all these things in your applications, how you can bind the database, how you can use this approach. So that I have not yet explained. I'm only asking whether the concept is clear or not. Okay, all three approaches I have explained, not the steps. Okay. So by using a code first approach, you can also generate the model based upon the database. So if you have an existing database, you can still define classes that map to the existing database. So this you can do only in the code first approach. So I can say that code first approach is the combination of model first and database first. And the difference is that you have to write the code here. Whereas in the database first approach and the model first approach, you don't have to write any code. It is generating the model for you automatically. Okay, or the database for you automatically. So here it can generate the database automatically for you based upon your model classes, or also in addition, reverse engineering tools are available that allow you to generate the model classes from the existing database. So you can do the vice versa also. Just like you are creating the classes and generating a database. You can also use the existing database and generate the custom classes. That is also possible. Okay. So here you can see in the code first approach, from data model, we are generating database. Or if we have existing database, we can generate model classes. Correct? Is entity framework and EDMX file different? Dear, first of all, entity framework is not the file. Okay? Entity framework is a data access technology. .edmx is the extension of the file which you can create in your project for creating the model. Okay? So please don't get confused that entity framework is the file. EDMX is the extension, just like we have the extension of different files. Just like we have .txt, .doc and .xls. Different extensions are there. The same way we have one file with the extension .edmx. This file you can use for creating your models without writing the code. Okay, you can design your model. How we are creating a model? How we were creating the model till now? We were creating the model by writing the classes. If you don't want to do so, you can use the EDMX. Okay. So this is the thing. Okay, now the next thing is, okay, there is a question for all of you now. Which one of the following model uses the .edmx file and generates a database from it? A very simple question. Just some of the students were asking it. Which one of the following model uses the .edmx file and generates a database from it? Very easy question. Why you guys are taking a lot of time? Okay. So there are a lot of answers I'm getting. Most of the students are correct, but there are some incorrect answers also. I think still the students are confused. Okay, there is one answer I'm getting like database first approach. I don't know how the student is writing a database first approach. Okay, I can understand that you can have some confusion between the code first approach and the model first approach, but I'm not getting you that how you can say database first approach, because I have not discussed any EDMX file in the database first approach. So the correct answer is model first approach. In the model first approach, we are using .edmx file for creating the models. Simple. Okay. And some of you are writing code first approach also. So how you are writing a code first approach? There is no confusion. Because in the code first approach, I already told you that we don't have to create any EDMX file. We have to write the code for creating the model. See, for creating a model, there are two ways. Either you can create a .edmx file or you can write the code. In model first, you have to create the .edmx file. In code first approach, you have to write the code. So what is the confusion? Okay, as the name suggests, code first. That means we are writing a code. Correct? So there is no confusion. I hope that in understanding. Okay. All right. Now working with entity framework. So now you have understood that what is entity framework and what are the different type of approaches we have. Now we are going to discuss how we can work with entity framework. Means how we can implement this concept in our application. So in the code first approach, the domain model is defined first by creating custom classes. So since I'm going to show you the concept of code first approach, first of all we have to create the model classes. After creating a model classes, the database is then created by using the model. Okay, so automatically it will create the model according to the automatically it will create the database according to the model, and the structure of the database is determined by examining the structure of the model. Okay, so this thing we will discuss. Now the code first convention. Code first convention are a set of rules that automatically configures a conceptual model. Okay, there are some code first conventions are there in ASP.NET MVC. So what are the different code first conventions? Or I can tell you that while writing the code also, suppose if you are taking the name of your column or property as ID or class name ID, then automatically it will be considered as a primary key. Okay, so that is the code first convention. There are some naming conventions are there in the ASP.NET which we have to consider here. So based on table naming convention, if the name of the model class is customer, the name of the corresponding table will be customers. Okay, let's say you are taking the name of your model as customer. So in your database, it will create a table with the name customers. Okay, this is a naming convention. Automatically it will do that thing. Based upon a primary key convention, if in a class you have created the property named ID or class name ID, then the property is assumed to be a primary key. That means, suppose you have created one model called customer. In that model, you are defining one property and the property name is ID. Now that particular property will be considered as primary key. Or even if you are writing customer ID, then also it will be considered as a primary key, because there is a class name involved in that property name, class name and then ID. So either you can take class name ID or only ID, it will be considered as a primary key. Fine. So entity framework sets up an auto incrementing key column in SQL Server to hold the property value. Okay. So automatically it sets up the auto increment column and automatically it generates the value for you. I hope you know the identity column, identity property available in SQL Server. Okay. There is an identity property available in the database which we generally use for generating the values automatically. That is the auto increment column. So if you are making your column as a primary key, by default it will be considered as an identity column and automatically it increments the value. Correct? So this is the naming convention. Now you can use the code first approach by performing the following steps. So now I'm going to show you how you can use the code first approach in your application. So you can use the code first approach by performing the following steps. The first step is create the model class, or if you have more than one, you can create more than one classes also, depends on the requirement. So create the model classes. After that you have to create the database context. This is very important for you to understand that what is database context. In this database context file, we will define the structure of the database and the location of the database. All the things we will define here. Configure the database location, and then we have to create a controller. So these are the steps that we have to follow for creating the database, or for using the database first approach. Okay. So now let's understand how we can use data like code first approach in our application. And for this, I will create a new application here, and in that application, I'll use this code first approach. Okay. So before I create the application, if you have any questions, any doubts, you please ask. Or if all the things are clear till now, you please click on plus so that I can start my demo. I request you to write your queries if you have any, because it is really very important for you to understand the concept before you understand the practical implementation. I will explain you the DB context. Okay, just wait. I will explain you what is that DB context. Okay. Apart from that, if you have any question, you can ask. Okay, so I guess there are no questions. So nobody is asking any query. Fine. So I'm considering that there are no questions, and I'm going to show you the example now. So let me just open the Visual Studio. And I'm creating a new project here. We are creating the ASP.NET MVC application. And here I'm giving a name, entity demo. So any name I can give to my application, whatever I want. So I'm giving entity demo, and then I can say OK. So this time also I'm going to use the basic template, because I don't want any predefined pages or controllers and all. So I'm going to select basic. Okay. Now generally, when we have created the application earlier, what we have done, we have directly created the controller, and then we were creating the views and all. But now the thing is different. Since we would like to use the database of our application, first of all, we should define the structure. And since we are using a code first approach, we have to create the models. And according to that model, it will automatically generate the database. Okay. So it is creating a project, and once it is done, I will show you how you can create the model. Anyways, you already know that how you can create a model, but still I have to create it again. So my project is created, and I can go to my Solution Explorer. You can see it is showing all your folders that it has created in your project, controllers, models and all. So what was the first step which you have seen on the slide? The first step was create model classes. So I'm going to create a model class now. For this, I can simply right click on the model folder, going to add, then class. So this is not a new thing I'm telling you. This already we have studied many times before. Okay. So I'm giving a name of my model as product, and then I can say add. So this is my model class I have created, and in this model class now we are going to define some properties. Okay. So these are some of the properties I have defined here. Let's say ID, name, description, quantity, price. So you can also take it as product ID if you want. There is no problem. You can take product ID also. So if you're taking product ID or if you're taking ID, it will be considered as a primary key only. Okay, so it will be considered as a primary key only. So product ID is the name of the property. So name, description, quantity and price. These are all the properties are there. Okay. So after defining all these properties, what we can do? We can just build a project. Remember this thing that whenever you are building your project, this means you're compiling and saving all the changes of your project. So I'm building my project so that it can save all the changes. Now, after this, if I want to create some more models, I can create some more. So for creating a new model, again you can right click on the model and again you can create one more class and then you can define the properties. But right now I'm giving you this example with only one model. Later on I will create few more. Okay. So one model I have right now, product. So first step is done. Correct? I hope that you all are writing the steps which I'm telling you on my desktop. Okay. So you please write it how I'm doing it here. And in between the demo, if you are getting some issues or you have not understood, you please immediately raise the hand, because once I complete this demo, then if you ask the query, ask like, sir, please repeat and all, then it will not be possible for me. Okay? Because it will take a lot of time for me to create this whole demo. So I request you to please write it, and while showing you the demo, in case if you are getting some issues or you have not understood anything, immediately raise the hand then and there. Okay? You should not wait. Momita, I have just created one project and created one model. That's it. Is that clear how you can create a model? Only first step I have explained. And this is not a new thing which I am telling you here. How to create a model, this we have discussed many times in the previous sessions. Okay, so I hope that it is clear to you that how you can create a model. Only first step I have completed, and now I'm moving to the next step. So after creating a model, the next step is you have to create the database context file. Okay. So what is the database context file and how you can create? The database context, it is nothing, it's just a class. Just like you have created the class here, the same way you have to create one more class. And how you can do that? You can simply right click on this model and then you can go to add, and here we have class. When we click on class, it will open up this window, and here we can mention the name of the class. So for example, I'm giving a name of my class here, my data context. So the name of the class the name of the file is mydatacontext.cs. And now I can say add. So when I click on add, you can see the file has been added here. And now I can define the properties. Now you have to understand very carefully that why we are creating this data context file. Okay. Actually, this database context file you are creating for defining the structure of the database and for establishing a connection with your database. You have to define each and everything here. What all tables you want to create in your database. What is the location of the database, the connection string, these all things you have to define here. Okay. So what I'm doing, this my data context class which I have created, this DB context, this class you have to inherit from one file called DB context. So in order to use that class, you have to add one namespace using system.data.entity. This namespace you have to add here. and then you have to inherit one class DB context. So whenever you are creating your data context, database context, your class must inherit this DB context class. This DB context is a predefined class available in system.data.entity namespace. Okay. So this class I have created, I'm inheriting this class, and after that we are writing one constructor. Okay, public my data context. Fine. So my data context over here, and in this my data context we have to define the connection string. Okay. So we are just writing here public my data context, and then we are going to write colon base keyword. Okay, is there anyone who can tell me that what is base keyword and what is the need of writing a base keyword? Means what is the use of base keyword? It's a very simple question I am asking to you, and I hope you have studied this thing in your C#. Base keyword. This is a keyword available in the C#. What is the use of this keyword? Base. Tell me. Okay, constructor inheriting from base class, parent class constructor. The base keyword inherit the parent class. No, it is not inheriting the parent class, you can't say that. It's just invoking the base class. No, if I don't write this base class, does it mean that it will not invoke? No. Okay, without writing, suppose if I'm not writing this base keyword here, still I'm inheriting this DB context is the parent class, no? The base keyword is used to access members of the base class from within a derived class. Yes, that is correct, Umani. This answer is absolutely correct. And access members of the base class, yes, that is correct, John Paul. And inherited class can use parent class as well as child class. No, child class means like my data context itself is a child class, na? So that too already we can use. Refer to the base class constructor. Okay, yes, this can be referred the base class constructor. We can take details from base class for child using base. See, in simple words, we can say that base keyword you can use to access the members of the base class. So for example, I'm writing here base, and if I write dot, now whatever properties and methods you can see here in this list, these all properties and methods are of DB context class. So if I'm writing base, it is actually referring the base class of this my data context. And which is the base class right now? DB context. Now, if suppose I write this base keyword here, suppose I'm writing like this base, and here I'm writing one thing. Why I'm writing it, that I will tell you later. Default connection. Okay, this I'm writing here. So, base, default connection I'm just writing over here. What is the meaning of this statement? Suppose if I'm writing it in this constructor. This means I'm trying to call the constructor of the base class. Okay, I'm calling the constructor of this DB context class. There is an overloaded constructor available in this DB context class which I'm calling, and whatever value I'm passing here, it will get stored in that constructor. So what is the meaning of this default connection? Actually, we are writing the name of the connection string. For understanding this default connection, you have to go to your web.config file. Okay, there is a web.config file available in the Solution Explorer. You have to go to this file for understanding this default connection. So let's go. If you go to this file, you will see there is one default connection is there. Okay, connection strings, add name, default connection. Correct. The provider name is system.data.sql client, and in the connection string there is a connection string for the database. Okay, data source equals to, this is a data source. Okay, now remember this thing that whenever we are defining a connection string, we have to mention the details of our database, of our server. Definitely, if you are going to connect up with your database, you have to give the details of your database server and the name of the database, everything you have to pass. So where we have to pass this all information? In the connection string. So this is known as connection string. In this connection string, we will define the name of the server where I want to create a database, the name of the database that I would like to take, and the other details such as the username and password if I am using. Correct? Since right now I am going to use the database available in the Visual Studio. Okay, the Visual Studio's database I am using, because in your Visual Studio also, when you install it, you will get one database server, local database server you will get. You don't have to install the SQL server separately. Okay, for development purpose, you have one database server in your Visual Studio also. We are going to use that database server for creating a database. And the name of that database server is localDB v11.0. The same way we have to write it. Okay. So what are the different things we are passing here? The name of the server, data source. Initial catalog means the name of the database. Just like we can give the name of the database AdventureWorks, Northwind, we can give the database name as My Database, NIIT Data, any name. So by default, it is taking the name of the database as ASP.NET Entity Demo and some numbers. If you would like to change, you can change it. But I'm not changing it here. I would like to keep it as it is. But if you want to change, you can change it as well. You can just give your own name here, and whatever name you are passing here, it will create a database with the same name. Correct? So data source means server name. Initial catalog, database name. After that, we are writing integrated security equals to SSPI, and attached DB file name equals to this one. So there is already one database file is available in my app data folder, which we are going to attach with my application. Okay. So actually, where it will create that database and where it will create that database file, in your application there is one folder called app data. Okay. In this app data folder only, it will create the database file. Okay. So this is app_data folder. In this folder only, it will create the database. Okay. So attached DB file name equals to, this is the file name. Correct. So this is a connection string. So I hope that you have understood the connection string which we are going to mention here. Most importantly, three things we have mentioned. Data source means server name, initial catalog means database name, and attached DB file name, that is the name of the file which it should create for your database. Okay? Is that clear to all of you, the connection string? I'm not getting any response. Sir, it is getting automatically configured now at web.config file. Yes, we are not creating this. Automatically it will get created. We are not creating or we are not writing it. Okay. So automatically this particular connection string will get created in your web.config file. I am just telling you that how it established the connection with the database and from where I can configure the location. Okay. All the things are necessary, Rajiv. There is nothing optional over here. Whatever things are mentioned in the connection string, all the things are mandatory. There is nothing optional. Whether it is integrated security or a data source or an initial catalog or a -db file name, everything is necessary. Here the connection string is similar to connection string in ADO.NET. Yes, it is similar. There is no difference. If you have a knowledge of ADO.NET, you can easily understand. Can we create connection string ourselves, custom connection string? Yes, Ishant, we can do that. For example, right now it is creating my database on this server. For example, I would like to create my database on my SQL server that I have installed separately. Then I can give the name of my server. Suppose in my system I already have my database server. So the name of that database server is this, Del Ro Dheeraj. So if I'm changing a name of my database server, then what will happen? It will create the database on that server, not in the database server available in the Visual Studio. Okay. So any connection string you can have. Right now, I'm not changing that connection string or any thing in the connection string because first of all, I want to tell you that how it creates a database in the application itself. Then only you can change the location. Okay. So I don't want to make it very complex. That's why I'm not changing anything. This whole connection string you will get as it is. I'm not changing even a single word. Okay. If I need to new DB, how can do? If I need new DB, if you need new database over here, you can write the name of the database. Whatever you will pass here, it will create a database with that name. Can you explain the connection string? So that's what I have explained. The connection string only I have explained to you. Now what else? I have explained you the connection string only, that we have the data source, we have initial catalog, and we have attached DB file name. This is the property. This attached DB file name property is referring your data directory. Okay. See, whenever we are writing here data directory now, actually it is referring this folder, app_data. Okay. This is the keyword kind of a thing you can say that if we are saying data directory, this means we are referring this app_data. Okay, this app_data. In this folder, it will create the file of your database with this name. Okay. What is the integrated security? Since we are not going to use any user credentials such as username and password for my database, that's why the integrated security we are using here. In case if we are using any user ID and password in my database, then what we have to do? In that case, we have to provide the username and password. Suppose I'm using my database server. In my database server, some username and password is added. Okay, and without having that user ID and password, I can't use that. So then we have to write the user ID and password here instead of writing integrated security equals to SSPI, or also I can write integrated security equals to true. Okay. So that is the thing why we are writing it. So as you can see, the name of this particular connection string is default connection. Okay. That's why only we are passing the same name here, default connection. So whatever name we have of my connection string, we have to mention the name here. Okay, so this means that whatever structure I'm defining of my database here, it will create the database objects on this connection string. Okay, now let me create some property here. Let's say I'm going to create a property called dbset product, and I'm going to write the name as products. Okay, now what is the meaning of this property and why we are doing it? Your table will not be created until unless you write the properties in the DB context, in the database context file. Whatever properties you are defining here, according to that only, it will map your object with your database. So here actually you are mapping. Here only you are mapping the things. So you are saying that you want to create a table with the name products, and it should follow the structure of product model. So now when it creates a database, it will create a table with the name products, and products table will follow the product model. Okay, so that's why we are writing. So whatever table you want to create here, you can add the property accordingly. So suppose I have one more model in my application called customer. So I can write one more property, public dbset customer customers. So it will create one table as customers and follow a model customer. So here only we are doing a mapping. Product model is mapped with products table. Okay. If we change database, then the files are stored in app_data folder or other somewhere. Yes, it will change the files. Suppose if you are making any changes in the database, then definitely it will make the changes in the files also. Okay. So in the app_data only, it will store your database files, and whatever changes you are making, it will make the changes over there. Okay. So this I have created the DB context. The data context file I have created. So second step is completed. Now we have to, actually the third step also I have completed, configure the database location. So 3 steps I have completed here. I hope that it is now clear. The last step I will perform here, creating a controller, but before that, if you have any questions, you can ask. I'm going very slowly, I hope, so that you can understand more clearly. I'm not going too fast. So after completing each and everything, I'm taking a confirmation from all of you so that you can understand it more clearly. Okay, so just quickly write yes or no in the hand raise. If you have understood, say yes. If no, then you please write your queries. Do it quickly. There are 90 students are there. So let's see how many of you are writing. 90 logins I can see right now. So if anybody is not writing, maybe he or she is sleeping. So I will put that particular student on air. Okay, so I got around 55 responses. What about the rest? Student from Core Mangala Center, if you have not understood, can you please tell me what is the, what you have not understood so that I can explain you? Student from Core Mangala Center, you are saying no. So what you have not understood, can you please tell me so that I can explain you here? So I'm getting some questions as well. Okay. I'm getting some questions also. Let's say I'm not getting DB set. Okay, correct. I will explain you. What exactly is configuration part? Configuration part means you are configuring the location of the database. Just like in the web.config, if you would like to change anything in the connection string, you can change. Why we are writing a connection string? Actually, we are defining the location where I want to create a database. What should be the name of the database? What should be the name of your database file? That we are configuring here. So that is configuration. Okay. DB set is what? Okay, so I will tell you. One more student is asking about this DB set. How to configure the database location in the web.config. I told you na. We have to go to the web.config file. However, right now we are not doing anything. Okay, but if you want to configure anything in the web.config file, in the database location, you can go to the web.config file and you can change it here. Okay, in the connection string. So how to configure the database location from web.config file in the connection string. Okay. Create model class, DB context, configure DB location, creates a controller. Yes, that is correct. Can you please tell us web.config? I hope you know about the web.config file. The web.config file is the configuration file of your website. Whatever kind of configurations you would like to add or you want to implement on your entire website, you should add it in the web.config. Okay. Why we are doing it in the web.config? If you want, you can write this connection string in your code also. For example, I don't want to use my web.config file. So what we can do, we can directly write our connection string here. Okay, like this. The whole connection string I have pasted here in the base keyword. But now, there is a limitation. Okay, there is a drawback. What is the limitation? Suppose you have multiple controllers. Okay, you have multiple controllers here. And in your controller, you have defined the connection string. So suppose there are total 10 controller files you have created. And in all 10 controllers, you have mentioned connection string like this. Okay, means you are hard coding your connection string in your classes. In future, if you would like to change your connection string, then what will happen? You have to change it in all the pages, in all your controller files. That means you have to modify your code, which is not at all recommended. That you should modify your code just because of for changing the connection string. So that's why we are writing the connection string in the web.config and we are getting that connection string from there. In future, if I want to make any changes, I can make the changes only in the web.config file and it will get reflected in all the controller files or whatever coding files I have created. This is the benefit of web.config. Okay, I hope you have understood now, student from CSU Road. For every model, it's necessary to create separate DB context class. No, DB context class, we don't have to create again and again. Okay, please remember, we should not create the data context again and again. Data context, always it will be one, single. Okay, we should not create multiple data context file. Okay, because multiple data context file means what? You are defining the connection string multiple times. No, na? What is the use? So DB context, the data context file which I have created here, this I have to create only once in one single project, not multiple times. And whatever models you have created, you have to define the name of that models here in the class only. Okay. All right. So now some of you are asking about this DB set. Okay. See, this DB set is a type actually. Okay. This DB set represents the collection of all entities in the context. Since this particular entity I would like to map with my table, I have to give this DB set over here. So DB set is a predefined class available in the .NET framework. It resides in system.data.entity and it's a generic class. Whenever you are going to define your property for creating a table, it must be of DB set. Obviously, we can't give here public string products. Can I do that? Definitely not, because I'm not defining the columns here. Now I'm going to create a table, and the table return type I have to give as DB set. Then only it will be considered as a entity. Okay. So DB set means we are defining the entity. It's a type. So this is the thing, and after that, next thing is creating a controller. Before you create a controller, please write it in the bold letters. You should build your project. Otherwise, it will create some problems. Okay? You can write it in the double quotes or in the brackets, or so that you can remember this this particular thing. That after creating your model and DB context, you should build your project. So go to build and then build solution. If suppose you are not building your project, then what will happen? At the time of adding a controller, you will not be able to see this file. Okay, because we have to use this file while creating a controller. Now let's go to Solution Explorer. I'm going to controllers. Okay, now I'm going to right click here. Then I can go to add. And here I have one option, controller. So I'm adding a controller in the same way just like we have added it here. There is no difference. The only difference is this time we will use a different template. Okay. So as you know that we have different templates in our scaffolding options. So the name of the controller I'm giving as home. Scaffolding option template I'm using this time. MVC controller with read-write actions and views using entity framework. Okay. So this option we have to use. Once you select this option, you can see it is enabling these two drop-down list also, model class and data context class. So I'm going to select this model class which I'm selecting from here, product, and data context class I'm selecting my data context. Okay. So these all things I'm selecting from here. This is the name of the controller. This is the template using entity framework. Model class is product. Data context class is my data context. Correct? Now I can simply click on add. The moment I click on add, it will automatically create one controller. And yes, this time it will also create the views. Because you have used the scaffolding. And this time, since you are binding with your data context and model, you don't have to tell that you want to create a list view or you want to create a template or details or edit or delete. Automatically, it will create the views for you. Okay. So you can see the controller is created and also the views are created. So these views also will get created automatically. So how many views are created? Index, edit, details, delete and create. These all views will get created automatically. Correct? So you can see and the code is also generated for you automatically. You can see all your database code is generated. You don't have to write even a small thing. Nothing. You don't have to write anything here. Correct? You can see already the code is generated for you. It is using that product model and finding it in the details. All the thing it is doing automatically. In the create, it is checking that model state dot is valid. If it is valid, then it should save the changes. Okay. So we are using this property here. Fine. So what I'm doing, I'm going to execute this now. So let's execute this example. So when I execute this example, it will show you the index page. Okay, because it's by default it is set as default. Format of the initialization string does not confirm. Oops, sorry. In the controller, actually I'm using a lot of escape sequence characters now, so it will be good if I write here default connection. Otherwise I have to write that @ sign to bypass that all escape sequence characters. So when I execute this application, for the first time it will take few seconds because it will automatically generate the database for you. Okay. So it will create a database file. Now you can see it is showing you that index page. Remember this thing that this time we have not created the views just like we have created earlier by right clicking on the action method, going to the add view. No, it has created the views automatically. Okay. So this is my index view. I'm going to create new. So it will show you that new page where you can enter the product information. So let's say I'm writing here laptop, description is Lenovo, quantity 5, price is 25,000. When I click on create, it will save these details in the database. And yes, this time it will store this information on a permanent basis in the database. Even if you close the application and restart the application, still it will display the same information. So let me click on create. So you can see this data is now added in the list and this data is now saved permanently. Let me show you. I'm closing this browser. So my window is closed. Now I'm running it again and let's see whether it is showing you the data again or not. So yes, it is showing you the data again. So this means this data is now getting stored on a permanent basis. Okay. So if you would like to see the details, all the template will work automatically for you. Okay. Earlier I've told you now that I'm showing you the create template and list template only, and the rest of the templates we'll discuss in the entity framework. So now you can see all these templates will work automatically for you. If you go to edit, you can edit the information. For example, you want to change the price. I'm changing it to 35,000. So now I can save. So price is changed and it is changed on a permanent basis. Okay, in the database, whatever changes, whatever things you are doing, all the things will happen off permanently. Correct? If you want to see the details, you can go to the details. It will show you the data like this in the details template. Correct? You can go to back to list. If you want to delete, you can click on this delete. And here you can see it is asking for a confirmation. Are you sure you want to delete this? If I say delete, it will delete that. So let's click on delete. So you can see the record is deleted. So now it is deleted permanently. Okay. So the question is now, can we see that particular database where it is being created? Okay. So the database is actually created in the app data folder, but still if you see that folder, it is not showing you any file, because actually in the app data file, the database file is hidden. How you can view that file? You have to click on this file, show all files option. If you click on that, it will show you this file here. You can see ASP.NET Entity Demo some numbers.mdf. This is the same name which we have given in the connection string. Actually, we have not given. It was already there. So it has created the file with this name only. So this is my database file. In your Visual Studio, if you want to see the data, you can simply double click on it and it will open the database in your Visual Studio itself. Okay. But actually, this is a problem in my system actually. There is a problem in my system. It does not open that particular database in my Visual Studio. There is some problem in the Visual Studio, but you can try it in your system and it will show you like this. Okay, at the left hand side it will show you all these things, tables, views, stored procedures. So I can go to tables, and you will see here we have one table, products, and inside this table we have all these columns that we have defined in our model: product ID, name, description, quantity, price. If I want to see the data, I can simply right click here and then I can go to view data. Okay, I can go to that show table data. This is the option, but unfortunately in my system this option will not work. There is some problem. Okay, but you can try it in your system. When you click on this show table data now, it will show you the data here only in the rows and columns. Okay, so you can go to show table data and it will display the data here only. Correct? Where is show all files? Okay, show all files is there on the Solution Explorer on the top. Okay, so this is the show all files. Ishant, if you would like to see the code of that delete and all, you can see it here in your controller. Okay, here only it is showing you that particular code, how it is deleting, how it is showing the details. Here you can see. Okay, this is correct. So this is a delete method. What we are doing, we are trying to find out the particular product. If it is null, then it should return the HTTP not found. Otherwise, it should delete. Okay. So this is a delete. You can see. If delete is confirmed, then we are using this remove method for removing a product. Okay. Which data access technology is more efficient, Entity Framework or ADO.NET? In terms of the object modeling, the Entity Framework is more efficient. Okay, because if you're doing the same thing in your ADO.NET, you have to write a very complex code. Okay, there is no direct way of binding your objects with your database. But in Entity Framework, you can see how easily we have bind our object models with our database. We are not writing any complex code. We are only creating a model and we are just configuring the things and automatically is getting bind. Okay. So it depends like what kind of a like architecture you are using and what kind of application you are going to create. So if we have already created project, how can we connect that project with database? No, that you should not say that you have already created a project, because whenever you are creating a project, obviously in ASP.NET MVC, if you have already an existing database, you can use the database first approach. Otherwise, you have to use the model now. Either you should use a database or you should create a model. You can't say that you have created the whole project without database and without model. This is not at all possible. Okay, but yes, if you are talking about some other technologies apart from ASP.NET MVC, that's a different matter. So I'm not going to that details. But in your ASP.NET MVC, whenever you are creating any project, either you should create a database or you should create a model. Okay. You will also show the practical of database first approach and model first approach. No, this is not in our course. So that I will not tell you. But yes, if you want, I can just tell you in the extra sessions. Maybe I will take a cloud consultation. And yes, I remember that tomorrow is Wednesday. And tomorrow I'm going to take a cloud consultation for all of you. Okay. I'm going to take a cloud consultation for all of you tomorrow. And I will take some like doubts from the students. If you want to clarify your queries or doubts or want to know some extra about ASP.NET, you can connect up with me through that cloud consultation. Okay. The timing and the details I will upload on the group, and you please join. The URL also I will upload on the group, so you please join the cloud consultation and you can clarify all your queries. Okay. So tomorrow is your MR session, and I will connect up. You can connect up from your home. Okay, you should not connect from your center. I will like schedule timing so that at that time you must be in your home. I will not schedule between 1:30 to 3:30. Before that only I will schedule that cloud consultation, and then you can connect up. Okay. So that cloud consultation I'm going to take tomorrow for all of you, and then you can connect. Okay, and then you can ask all your queries, whatever you have. Can we add image data? We can add image data, Atanji, but the thing is, first of all, we have to convert it into binary, and then only we can save it in our database. So it's a very lengthy process. Directly, there is no way of adding any image data. Okay? But you can use an alternative. Let's say you can save your images in the folder and only part you can store in the database. That you can do. Okay? But if you really want to store your like images in your database, first of all you have to convert it into binary, and then only you can save it. Please tell me our batch name. I think you're talking about the group name. So the group name of this particular batch is PGP14_ASP_MVC, and the batch code is S160220 and S160221. There are some students who are modular students who are enrolled for ASP MVC only, I think. So for modular batches, the batch code is 221. For PGP students, the batch code is 220. Okay, S160220. This is for PGP students. Okay, and this is the group name. And many students has joined this group and they are regularly downloading the notes from there. Please provide required files for Lab at Home 5 gift gallery store. All the necessary files are already available in your center. You please connect up with your class coordinator or center GL. They will provide you the files. If still you are not getting it, you please let me know. Okay? I don't know the ADO.NET. There is no problem to study ASP.NET MVC. No, there is no problem in understanding the ASP MVC because we are not going to discuss anything about ADO.NET. Okay, we will discuss only entity framework. See, I told you now that different data access technologies are there. ADO.NET is also data access technology. Entity framework is also data access technology. Which data access technology we are using in ASP MVC? Entity framework. We are not going to use ADO. Okay. But if you have a knowledge of ADO, that's an additional advantage. Okay. Kindly send me the link of previous video because I have missed previous classes. I can't send any videos, links or any kind of recorded sessions. You have to connect up with your center only for these all things. Okay. Oops. Sorry, really very sorry. I have just, by mistake, I have mentioned the batch code of some another batch. Thank you so much. One student has told me this from Ghatkopar. The batch code is 347 and 348. This is the batch code of my 330 batch. Really very sorry. And it is mentioned in my group also. Okay, so this is the batch code. You please correct it. 347, 348. This is the batch code. Thank you so much, the student from Ghatkopar and Parth from Andheri, for reminding me. Okay. So this is the batch code. S160347, S160348. 347 is for PGP student and 348 is for modular student. ASP or ASP in group name. ASPS. ASP MVC. Okay, this is ASP MVC. So tomorrow it's MR and then later the cloud session. No, not later actually. I will take it before your MR because MR will be I think in between 1:30 to 3:30 na. So I will try to take it in the morning and then you can connect up with me and you can ask your queries. The information of the cloud consultation I will post it on the portal and then you can follow that link. You can connect up with me and whatever doubts you have till now in ASP.NET you can ask all your queries. So you please attend that session to clarify all your doubts. Okay. When at our on MR session. The MR session will be at the same time as it is happening as usual. There is no difference. There is no change in the timing. Okay, the cloud session I will take in the morning. Correct? So that information I will upload. Don't worry. Okay. So that's it from my side today, and the next session will be on Thursday, and tomorrow is the cloud consultation for all of you, so you can clarify all your queries, and then after that we will meet on Thursday. Okay, and we will continue with this entity framework only on Thursday. Thank you so much. I'm just initiating a feedback. You please complete it before you leave. Thank you.